You're in, I think Genesis chapter 8 tonight.
Yes.
Does that sound right? Okay. All right. So last week we saw that God had decided that He was going to select a righteous man to keep life going on this planet. So God didn't completely destroy the planet, but He pretty much refurbished all of it. If you remember, we talked about the fact that, once again, it not only rained for 40 days and 40 nights, but the deluge that came from that was probably the water canopy that was broken, that surrounded the earth at creation, plus all the cataclysmic platonic shifts, platonic plates in the bottom of the ocean were probably moved, and there was great upheaval within the oceans. And today what we have now is mountains were probably at one time underneath the sea and vice versa. So it was just a cataclysmic event. I mean, it was more than a flood. God shook this planet big time and judged it. Okay, and so that's what we need to see here, and it really explains a lot of things that we're finding out today. For instance, why is there the greatest fossil bed that they find is on top of the Himalayas, when fossils are supposed to be animals or organic things that were flooded by water, suddenly drowned by water, is how fossils are formed. And so they got on top of the Himalayas. So the Himalayas at one time must have been part of the ocean floor. And that's the kind of upheaval that we see on our planet due to Noah's flood. It explains the Grand Canyon, I'll be honest with you. There's no Snake River that caused that Grand Canyon. It was part of this cataclysmic event that happened as God's judgment. Okay, so Noah and his family, though, they found grace in the eyes of the Lord. So we saw God's command last week that He is to prepare the ark. How long did it take Him to build the ark?
120.
120 years. So when we read that God said that man's lifespan will be, be 120 years, man will be 120 years, He's not talking about the longevity of life, but how long it would take Noah to build the ark. Because that ark ends up being an ocean liner. It's a huge ship. And then once again we go back and look at how could a man back in those days build something that magnanimous and be so efficient. Early man was not a caveman. He was brilliant.
Right.
He was probably maybe more brilliant than we are today. He just didn't have the tools and the resources. So anyway, so now we're looking at chapter 8. And so let's get into it tonight. It says in verse 1, so anyway, when we saw that the flood happened, and the flood happened for 40 days and 40 nights it rained, and that the earth was actually, the earth was totally flooded from the mountaintops for how long? Does anybody remember? 5 months, 150 days, I think it was. Okay, all right. So, verse 8 now, it says, verse 1 in chapter 8, Then God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the animals that were in the ark. Now, when it says God remembered Noah, it doesn't mean that God's forgetful. It just means that the time was now right for God to move on Noah. It was time now. The time had passed and everything was absolute. There was no question. Everything was destroyed except for the sea life. Okay? The sea life was able to probably survive. Certain amounts of sea life were able to survive. And it says here, and God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters subsided. Can you imagine the winds that He caused? You know, think about today. I mean, really, if you think about before the flood, if the earth was indeed, the biosphere was a greenhouse effect with nothing, there was probably not hardly any wind blowing back then. But once this canopy was broken, this water canopy, then now we have the great, you know, like we have the Gulf Stream and the El Nino and, you know, whatever they have going through all the weather. You know, we have weathermen now, thanks to Noah's flood. Right? And they're very precise too, aren't they?
Science. Yeah, they get paid when they're right or wrong.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, God caused a great wind, and then verse 2 says, the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven were also stopped. Remember, the fountains of the deep, right? That's what we're talking about. It wasn't just rain coming from the heavens. It was the core of the earth was exploding up at the same time the water was coming down. So you talk about friction and density across the crust of the planet, that's what caused all that, okay? And it said, and the rain from heaven was restrained. In verse 3, and the waters receded continually from the earth. At the end of the 150 days, the waters decreased. And then the ark rested when? What's the date here? The seventh one.
The 17th day.
What day?
17th.
The 17th day. Anybody know when the rain started?
On the 17th day,
The
wasn't it?
17th day.
Yeah.
You think that was by accident? Let me show you this calendar. I don't know if you can see it or not. Here's Easter this year, right? Easter ended up being on the 17th day this year, right? Everybody remember that? 17th day is Easter.
Was Easter this year or will be Easter next year?
What's that?
The 17th day for Easter, this?
Well, it was this year's 17th day, but I want to show you something though.
Okay, okay.
So anyway, let me see if I can read this. Okay. Let's go to Exodus before I read this to you, before I read this. Let's go to Exodus chapter 12. Exodus chapter 12. Now this is God telling Moses he's instituting the Passover because he's getting ready to deliver the Israelites from captivity from Egypt. Okay, everybody remember that, Moses, the Ten Commandments and all that? Okay. This is where God's giving him instructions here, chapter 12 of Exodus. It says, now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be the beginning of months, it shall be the first month of the year to you. So you see, God is saying this month is going to be the first month for the Jewish people from this day forward. So God is really creating a new calendar for the Jewish people. Everybody see that? For you, this will be the first month of the year.
Where's that?
12-1.
12.
12-1 and 2.
See that? Verse 2. It shall be the first month of the year to you. So he's giving the Jewish people a new timetable. Now look at verse 3. Speak to all the congregation of the Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, every man shall take for himself a lamb according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor to his house take it according to the number of persons. According to each man's need, you shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. Now you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight. Okay? That was a command for the Passover, right at the end of the day, on the 14th day, as the sun was getting ready to go down. Okay? Everybody got that? All right, this year our calendar Easter just happened to fall. It was really uncanny, but so on the 10th day, it's Palm Sunday. On the 10th day of the month, they're to take a lamb. So on Palm Sunday, on the 10th day, Jesus rolled into Jerusalem. The lamb came to them.
Just made my hair stand up.
So the lamb came to them on Palm Sunday. On the 14th, on a Thursday night, on the 14th he was crucified. That's why we have Maundy Thursday. He wasn't killed on Good Friday. He was crucified on a Thursday. Right before the sun was going down, they pulled him off the cross because he said, remember the Sabbath is getting ready to start? It wasn't a Sunday Sabbath. That was a special week because of Passover instituted before. That was a special Sabbath during the middle of the Passover week. That's why they couldn't go and anoint his body. That Friday of the Passover week was a holy Sabbath day. It wasn't their normal Sabbath. That's why the women couldn't go anoint him. So the lamb is killed on the 14th, like Exodus says, right? And then what happens? 1, 2, 3, the 17th. What happens on the 17th?
He arose.
It's rest. Man can rest from the old covenant.
Wow.
Remember what Noah's name means? Rest. See, God doesn't make mistakes, does he?
No.
Woo! Yeah! I'm about ready to get Baptist-costal now. Everybody understand that, though? Everybody understand that?
Yeah.
I think so.
I mean, you know, take the lamb, you take the lamb, Moses, on the 10th, you kill it on the 14th. Jesus came to them in Israel on the 10th day of the month. They killed him on 14th, right before the sun went down, and he rose 3 days later, which is the 17th.
Wow.
Our God is so great. Okay, let's go back to Genesis now. Okay, so it says here, verse 4, then the ark rested, there's that, I love that, rested, on the 7th month, the 17th day of the month, on the mountains of Ararat. And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. How specific can you be? I mean, look at the specificity on when the flood came, how long it was there, when they could see the tops of the mountains. I mean, this is not just pie in the sky. This is history that happened, and God told Moses these dates, right? And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. Verse 6, so it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. See, it rained for 40 days, and then after the tops of the mountains were seen, he could, 40 more days he had to wait. Verse 7, then he sent out a raven which had kept going to and fro until the waters had dried up from the earth. He also sent out from himself a dove to see if the waters had receded from the face of the ground. But the dove found no resting place for the sole of her foot, and she returned into the ark to him, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. So they could see the mountains, but after 40 days he released the dove to see if there was the ground itself was dry enough, and if the bird was bringing back food and vegetation. Okay? So there was a science behind this. In verse 10, and he waited yet another 7 days, and again he sent the dove out from the ark. Then the dove came to him in the evening, and behold, a freshly plucked olive leaf was in her mouth. And Noah knew that the waters had receded from the earth. So he waited yet another 7 days and sent out the dove, which did not return again to him anymore. So that's, what's that old saying? There's your sign. There's your sign. Verse 13, and it came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, that the waters, look what it says here. When does it new start? When does the new world start? The first month. Remember, God said to Moses, for you, when this Passover happens, this will be what? The first month of a new calendar for you. The first day of the month that the waters were dried up from the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and indeed the surface of the ground was dry. So even as the Israelites began, Passover was the first month of a new beginning for them. The first month for Noah was when the ark was rested and they could finally go out because God was doing something new. It's a new beginning.
So, this is my mind's just going crazy here, but, so you could go backwards from Noah right here, because God tells the ages of everybody. And you could actually go back to Adam.
Because of the genealogy, you can be, I don't want to say you can be precise to the
But you
year,
could be close.
but you can be pretty close.
Yeah.
And that's why most people who literally believe the Bible and understood how meticulous the Hebrew people were about their genealogy, believe in a young earth theory, that the earth is not millions of years old, that it's thousands of years old because of the genealogy. Okay, so that's a great question.
Cool.
Okay, so let's see, where did I stop?
You're on 14.
Okay, and in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. And then God spoke, saying, Go out of the ark, you and your wife, and your sons wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds and cattle, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, so that they may abound on the earth, and be fruitful and multiply. There it is again, right? But remember, what does it mean when God says, be fruitful and multiply? What does fruitful mean?
To,
Have children?
yes. Yes.
Quantity.
Yes.
Yeah, fruit.
Multiply means variety. Means a variety will multiply. Once again, we're all human beings in this room. Does anyone in here look alike? No, there's variety. That's what God ordered when He commanded all this. He engineered variety. And He spoke it into the evolution within the species. Y'all hear me that? Evolution within the species. Right? So God, I believe in evolution. I just don't believe in Darwinian evolution. We have to evolve within our own species, and every kind does, and that's why we have so many animals. Okay? I've got something here I want to read to you. It's I've got a book. It's called. Anybody ever heard of Ray Comfort? It's called the Evidence Study Bible, and he's got a lot of really great articles in here. He's got How Could All the Animals Fit on the Ark? Is one of the articles here. And he says here in the book Noah's Ark, a feasibility study, creationist researcher John Woodmorapi suggested that at most 16,000 animals were all that were needed to preserve the created kinds that God brought into the ark. The ark did not need to carry every kind of animal, nor did God command it. It carried only air-breathing, land-dwelling animals, creeping things, and winged animals such as birds. Aquatic life, fish, whales, etc., insects, and many amphibious creatures could have survived in sufficient numbers outside the ark. This cuts down significantly on the total number of animals that needed to be on board. Another factor that greatly reduces the space requirements is this. The tremendous variety in the species we see today did not exist in the days of Noah. Only the parent kinds of these species were required to be on the board in order to repopulate the earth. I think I've kind of told you guys that. He only needed 2 bovine. He only needed 2 canine. He only needed 2 pachyderm. Yeah. And once they got off the ark, he had commanded in them to be fruitful in quantity, and that's why they had to take male and female so that they could be fruitful, but then multiply. As they procreated, they created variety within their own species. He also goes on to say, Noah wouldn't have taken the largest animals on the ark, as there would be no reason to take senior animal citizens for a breeding population when the flood was over. It is more likely that he took younger juveniles aboard the ark, which would have required less space and less food. You know, just really good article, and it's throughout here. It's called the Evidence. It's called the Evidence Study Bible. If you're interested in it, it's really good. It's a New King James Version, but it's a really interesting Bible. Nice leather. Look at that nice leather. You can fold it and do all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
If it's true, like for dogs, canines, It's only one strand of DNA that makes a dog, any kind of dog, different than a wolf. So if that was God's design for all of the animals, that's all we needed.
Right,
That just one strand of DNA
right.
to make it different than its parent or
Sure.
grandparent or, so it made it like that for all species.
It is,
I would
it
rather
is.
have it for the wolf, but yeah.
He tells it to the animal
Yeah.
kingdom, God even said it to the plant kingdom, and he said it to the human race. All of them, he's engineered this procreation and variety within the species. So when he says, be fruitful and multiply, remember it means quantity and quality, or variety. That's what he means, and that's what he engineered into it. All right, let's see now. Okay, where are we?
18.
18. So Noah went out, and his sons, and his wife, and his son's wife with him, every animal, every creeping thing, every bird, and whatever creeps on the earth, according to their families, went out of the ark. Excuse me. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. You better believe he did, right? You ever escape something that's death-defying or something that should have taken you out? What's the first thing you did?
Thank God.
You probably got down on your knees and said, thank God, didn't you?
Thank God.
Can you imagine, though, being this family, being Noah? I mean, everybody that you know, other than your families, they're gone. You've been wiped out. And you've just experienced you've experienced the judgment of God, and you went through it. You passed through it safely. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and he took of every clean animal and every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Now we will find out later on that God instructs Moses and Aaron when they're doing burnt offerings, and even the Jewish people today, you know, they don't eat pork, right? You know that, right? Because pork is considered an unclean animal to them. They still hold to this culture today, okay? They don't eat shellfish. Jewish people don't eat lobster, don't eat shrimp, don't eat any kind of shellfish. Crawdads, they won't eat them because those are unclean animals. Now we find out, so you know, the question is, why do we eat it when God said they're unclean? It's because under the new covenant, we've been told as long as you give thanks to everything to God, you give God thanks for everything, everything is okay to eat.
What determines clean versus unclean?
It mostly had to do with the hooves. I think if they had split hooves, it made them an unclean animal. There were certain ways that their blood left their body too, made them unclean.
So God's told them.
God gave them a prescription.
They didn't decide.
Right, and you see it more specifically. We just get a glimpse of it now, but see, in God's mind, God had already told Noah what was clean and was, and we don't really get to specifics here, but later on in Leviticus, you get the specifics of the animals and the sea creatures and all that the Jewish people are told not to eat.
But there were still pigs on the ark.
Yeah, there would have been bovine on the ark. There were clean and unclean animals on the ark.
Okay.
He told them to take a pair of all unclean animals and 7 pairs of clean animals. And the reason why he's going to take 7 pairs of clean animals, because after you get off the boat, guess what? He's sacrificing a lot of clean animals.
I was just thinking, well, didn't he just destroy a whole line of animal when he sacrificed them? But
Well, they
no.
had to eat on the ark, well, they didn't eat meat then, did they?
No, they didn't eat until after. We're going to read that in a minute. Up until this point, they were still herbivorous.
The whole, everybody before this point.
All the animals, even the
Oh,
dinosaurs,
okay.
were herbivorous. There were no carnivores.
Okay.
That didn't happen until after the flood.
Wow,
T-Rex?
Yeah.
nobody eat bacon,
No, nobody ate bacon.
nobody eat bacon.
That's why they lived to be 900 years old.
That's a sad day. Gotta have
That's why Adam lived to be. Adam was vegan, man.
Yeah,
Next one.
Design them pigs, though.
Okay, where in the, okay. Verse 20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took every clean animal, every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake. Although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. How about that? We have evil hearts. We're born with evil hearts. Nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall never cease. So there'll always be day and night, there'll always be the seasons. They may be a little bit weird sometimes, we may have an Indian summer.
There'll be winter and summer. They didn't say anything about fall.
Well, maybe we won't have fall and spring anymore, we'll just have
That's
winter
what
and
I think.
summer.
I think it'll come a time when it'll just be winter and summer.
Yeah, maybe. But his point is, but the point he's making here is you're still gonna have the seasons. And the reason why is once that water canopy was ruptured, the earth went from being subtropical throughout the whole biosphere to now having polar ice caps. And then the wind that he used to blow across to drop the waters, now we have winds, we have these, you know, the Gulf Stream and all this we see blowing across our continent every day. When you look at a weather map, you know, that's going on everywhere. Yeah, Steve?
So.
So things have changed. Hold your thought. So you see, things have changed drastically from the time that God created things. And that's why man today looks at it and they imagine, what's always been this way. No, it hasn't. That's the point. And that's why early man cannot believe Genesis, because they want to take Genesis and put it in this time continuum where it's not the same. Until we get a scientist to be 930 years old, I'm not going to believe everything's the same. All right, Steve, go ahead.
Okay, so God flooded the earth because of the fallen angels that were with the women and created, you know, the giants and stuff like that.
Yeah,
That's why he originally flooded the earth, because,
that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
right, because he said he even knows that man is good. He just says it right here, that he's never can curse the ground because of the human race, even though everything they think or imagine is bent towards evil. So he knows that we're the way we are.
Yeah,
So there hadn't been a straw that broke the camel's back.
and that was it.
And that was it.
That was it. That was the straw. That was
Because he
it.
just
That
couldn't
God
let
said,
that
that's
go
enough.
on like that.
There was no way to recover, man. And that's the problem with sin.
Right.
Once sin opens the door, you may be able to put your foot there and stop it, but you're not going to close the door. That's the problem with sin. That's why we're called to be salt and light in this world. And to be stuffed shirts. Because sin has that effect. You can't stop the progression of sin. You can only halt it. And once you take your foot off the door, it's going to come bursting through with all kinds of other sin. It's a snowball effect. That's why we have to stop sin. And we are called to, we're called, Apostle Paul told Timothy to rebuke those that are wrong. You know what rebuke is? It's correction. You know, we're not called to be mamby-pamby doormats as a church. We're not called to be there. We're called to be loving but courageous ambassadors for the kingdom. And when the church stops being that because we're too intolerant, then the world just has its way.
Yeah, Pastor was just telling us a story about that, where he went to a girl who was in the children's ministry. Well, she was working with the teenagers and she was a young adult, and he found out she was living with her boyfriend, and so he went and talked to her about it and said, you know, I'd love you to come to church, but I can't have you in ministry. You're knowingly doing something. And she said, I'm not gonna have you control me, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I'm just telling you the truth, I'm just speaking the truth, and trying to be responsible as your pastor, but she left.
Right. And that happens. That's happened here too. It's happened here too. I mean, if you our culture today doesn't want to live by it. They don't want to live by this.
You're right.
We don't want to live by the Bible. People don't want, you know, who are you to judge me? Doesn't the Bible say, don't judge not lest you be judged? That's what you hear, right? But the Bible does tell us we are to judge behavior. We just can't judge motives.
I was in prayer one time and I asked the Lord about that very thing. I said, Lord, I don't understand this about, you know, what is that chapter? Is it Matthew 7?
Yes, Matthew 7.
And I prayed about it. I said, I don't understand. Can you help me to understand that? And he said, very simple. He said, judge by the word.
Yeah.
It's so simple. Judge by
The
the
word.
word.
And that's what it is. I'm not judging you. God has already judged this
That's
behavior.
right.
I'm not doing it.
That's
I
right.
mean, if I were God, I'd probably let a lot of things go that God doesn't let go. But I'm not God.
That's what you're not.
But I'm not God. Yeah.
What about that?
I mean, I quickly said I'm not God.
Well, one thing that made me feel bad was that man in Genesis, or maybe Exodus, and he was carrying sticks on the Sabbath. And the Lord had him killed.
Yeah.
That seemed
Harsh.
harsh, didn't it?
Well, it does. You know, you find out like Ananias and Sapphira in the early church. They just lied about how much money they actually made off the proceeds of selling land. They didn't give it all to the apostles like they said. And that's just it. And God struck them dead.
Yes.
You know, God had to be more harsh at these times when the faith was fledgling and was just trying to get a start. It got everybody's attention that, hey, you know, God is real and you don't mess with God. All right? We do know that as time goes on, the Bible's very clear that as we get closer to the return of the Lord, the earth is going to get more wicked. And it's not that God doesn't, he's aware of it because he tells us it's going to be that way. But for some reason, he's not stepping in at this point. He's letting people go their own way. Romans chapter 1 explains it. Romans chapter 1 talks about how a civilization will start a downward spiral. And every civilization starts there. And it all begins when, first of all, they worship the creature more than the creator. And once that happens, your civilization will go down the toilet. That's why I'm so against Darwinian evolution. And I preached against it this past Sunday. Yeah.
So the holy mackerel.
Welcome to my world.
Rubbing off on you.
Holy mackerel. Did you want to say something about fish?
Holy, that's it. Holy. God's holiness is why he couldn't tolerate anything. Because he's holy, and that means zero tolerance for sin, any kind of sin. You know, so as it got closer to Jesus, God had the answer for civilization, but it had to be Jesus doing it, not because God would kill everything again, because he can't tolerate any sin.
Yeah.
So it's not harsh, it's just sin. Sin is sin. I knew there was a thought somewhere in here. We just had to dig for it.
But
I think that's a good thought.
Can I ask another question? That
Sure.
probably, okay, Ananias and his wife, if they were a part of the early church and they were saved, they believed in Jesus as Christ, if God struck them dead, would they still
Go to heaven or hell?
Yeah,
Yeah, they go to heaven.
okay, so just. 'cause they're-
God takes out Christians today when they don't obey him, and God keeps telling them he wants them to do something or stop doing something, and God's telling them to do it. And especially in 1 Corinthians, Apostle Paul speaks to this specifically in 1 Corinthians when he's talking about they were taking communion, but they were being malicious and
Yes.
fighting a conflict amongst
Yes.
themselves. And he said, Paul says, God has taken some of you out to keep you from damaging the fellowship.
Oh, my goodness.
In other words, he took them home early,
Yeah.
but he took them home.
Okay. See,
I'm-
there's so many things that don't, like, I would have never read that way.
Yeah. But, you know, that's just it. Here's the thing about it. When you're born again, you become a son/daughter of God. When I say son, women, I hope you know, don't get it. You become sons of God, okay? So sin does not break your sonship, but it breaks your fellowship. If that prodigal would have died in a foreign country, the last name on the tombstone still would have been the last name of his father. He still belonged to his father. He just wouldn't have come home. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
And once again, because it's eternal life, it means that it's by God's grace we're saved. I mean, we never are good enough at any point of our lives, no matter how good we are, we're never holy enough to please God anyway. So it's a gift bestowed upon us.
And that's the point of repenting, is to restore fellowship.
Yes, yes. And that's just, and you know, here's a, since we're on that subject, confession of sin is not the same as admission of sin. People will say, oh yeah, I'm a sinner, everybody's a sinner, right? We hear that. Oh, I know, everybody's a sinner, we all sin. That's admitting sin. Confessing sin is agreeing with God that what you're doing is wrong.
Right.
And it's agreeing with a God that you're going to be judged for that if you continue to live that way, as if you're God. Does that make sense? So admission is not the same as confession. So a lot of people, they use in the VBS, admit to God you're a sinner. Well, no, it takes more than admitting to God. It takes confessing. Agreeing with God that your behavior is sinful and unholy. That's what that means, confession. Okay? All right, what time is it? Got time to go any further? Or any other questions about this? Okay.
Go ahead.
Bonnie?
Bonnie,
Age before you go.
patience. I was just gonna say something funny.
Bonnie beat you to it.
My 2-year-old great-granddaughter, when her mother talks to her, it proves this point you've been making. She says, no, no, no. And I say, why is that sweet, pretty little girl, why is she so negative?
Because she's sinful.
And I say, it's right here.
It's right there. Hey, in fact, how many of you had to teach your children how to disobey?
Not one.
Comes naturally, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's the evil in man's heart. We're all born with it. These sweet little babies that coo and smell so good when they first come out of the womb. Give them about another year and you want to tear their butts up.
They might, some of them.
Yeah. Bonnie, you had something to
Yeah,
say?
okay. So no plants or anything were taken on the ark, or seeds or?
Oh yeah, they took food. They took,
Okay.
yeah, because they were herbivorous. They had to eat. And I'm convinced that he didn't have to take a lot of food, because once again, even as God has bears hibernate, I think God put a lot of them to sleep for a long time.
Well, my question is though, how did the plants come up on the earth? Did they plant seeds, or did they from the water and the birds and everything?
Well, the water as it, the seeds and all that, as that was destroyed, it would settle into the earth.
Okay.
So God kind of replanted the earth as the waters were
Naturally.
receding.
Right.
And then the birds, of course, would go and pollinate the birds that populate too, but the beginning, and that's something else too, that originally, and you mentioned that's also, not only did Noah just need to have all these clean animals too, but he needed food to eat. There was no vegetation. Right after the flood, everything was destroyed. So he needed, and we're getting ready to read, then God says, now as soon as they get off the ark, now you can eat meat. Why? Because if he didn't, they couldn't have survived. Let's read chapter 9.
But when the dove went forth, she came back with an olive leaf. So there were plants growing.
True.
Yeah, it did come back with an olive leaf, but that was the top of a tree, so maybe a few of them might have survived, but not much. I mean, that flood would have probably destroyed most of the vegetation, maybe not all of it.
Yeah, I know everything was totally destroyed. But
Yeah.
when the water receded, it took months. And some plants.
Well, maybe that olive leaf was laying on the ground, maybe it wasn't on a tree.
Watch in the spring, when things begin to pop, I mean, they pop up
Yeah,
quickly.
Yes.
Now,
and that's true, in the spring, that's right, they do.
so if
So it could have, a seed could
if
have,
there was an olive leaf, it had to have been an olive tree.
yes,
Right.
or a small tree or
So
bush
it
or
wasn't,
whatever.
it wasn't a little seedling, it was a tree.
Yeah,
So the vegetation had to be growing. It wouldn't have been completely full size, but there
okay,
had to be
I'll
vegetation.
give you that, maybe not all of it was destroyed, but I would say
It had to be
good
there
amount of
eventually
it
to
was
start growing
destroyed.
leaves though.
Yeah. No, it was destroyed, but it came back from the seeds and everything.
Well, yeah,
that were
oh
left.
yeah, it came back. That was part of it, it came back. All the vegetation came back.
Yeah,
Just like the animal kingdom came back, it rebounded.
exactly.
Yeah, oh no, I don't, that's not an issue.
I have a, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
The difference between a raven and a dove.
He agreed with you.
Is the dove gonna land on the ground and not
That,
stay up in the tree?
that I don't know.
Never will.
Cause I know.
Only
we
thing
have
I know
pigeons
about
who
the
are
difference, a raven is black and a dove is white.
Well, I mean, the doves always walk around on the ground, and it
Yeah,
did
they're
say
more
something about his
ground
foot.
They nest in the
Yeah.
ground.
They
you know,
do?
Like in bushes and.
Okay, and the raven can fly
Raven,
around.
yeah,
for
they
a
can
long
fly
time.
for a
Yeah.
long time. Ravens are
So there's a
scavengers.
difference, that
Yeah.
the dove would go to the ground. Okay.
Let's get through chapter 9 real quick here, or the first part of it. Verse 1, chapter 9, so God blessed Noah and his sons, and he said to them, what? Have a bunch of kids, fill the earth.
Fill the earth.
And look at verse 2, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth. Now see, even before the flood, there were not dangerous animals that they had to run from. It's going to be like the millennial kingdom when Jesus comes back and the wolf will lie down with the lamb. It'll be a return to that. But after the flood, even the tooth and claw effect is now in effect. And you know, most animals, they attack you now anyway because why? They're afraid of you. So fear is now been instilled in the world after the flood. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth, on every bird of the air, and all that move on the earth, and on all the fish of the sea. They are giving into your hand. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. See, there's where it changes.
Oh, okay.
With the Noahic covenant, it changes from people being herbivorous to now they can be carnivores. I have given you all things, even as the green herbs. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is its blood. Surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning. From the hand of every beast I will require it, and from the hand of man, from the hand of every man's brother I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. There, right there, God is saying he's authorizing capital punishment. Right there.
Right.
He's authorizing, basically, capital punishment, according to God, is the deterrence for great evil. For in the image of God he made man, and as for you, there it goes again, what? Be fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply in it. Okay? I think we need to stop right there for tonight.
You know, God could have made the plants grow fast too.
That's what I was thinking, you know, he knew that
when they get off the boat, it's gonna take time for plants to grow. So they gotta eat something.
Yeah.
So he had provisions for that.
He had provision, he had enough clean animals that, and he gives them permission right after the flood. They can eat those clean animals.
Yeah.
Or in the past, they couldn't.
What does it mean when it says, however, you must not eat meat with its lifeblood in it?
Blood has to be there.
It's basically don't eat rare meat.
Okay.
Well, when they slaughter them,
The life is in the blood.
Don't you ever eat rare, it's a sin if you eat rare meat. Don't go get a rare steak.
I would never do that.
No, it
You
has
gotta
to,
drain the blood out.
it had to be the bloodletting of an animal is what they call, you had to completely drain the blood out of an animal because God says life is in the blood, blood is important to God.
Right.
Matter of fact, that's one thing man cannot replicate, you know that?
Yep.
Man can't make blood. You can make plasma in different types of variations of blood, but as far as making blood, that's why you have to go give donations to blood. Man cannot make blood. Only God can make blood. Amen?
So you're not supposed to eat rare meat?
I was teasing.